It's 1998. You know what that means. We're getting close to the end of the 90s. It's sad, I know, but it's gotta happen. It was a busy year, though, in 1998. A lot happened, so let's jump into it. On March 27th of that year, the FDA approves the use of a drug called Viagra. So I mentioned sildenafil, which is the chemical name for the drug, in the 1996 episode. And of course, they got to do some tests and all that kind of stuff. But basically, it was released in 1998. So all the older fellas could still be getting it on when they want. So that's cool. I guess Hugh Hefner was known to partake of it as he aged, yet still felt the need to date hot blondes. Yeah, that's it. Viagra. Speaking of penises, here's a nice transition. The Monica Lewinsky-Bill Clinton affair comes to light. So it starts off in January of that year where basically Bill Clinton's like, I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky. And it turns out he did. So at first, she didn't really want to talk about it either. But a friend of hers, more or less, got the news out there. And I'm not going to go into too much of it because we actually did a whole episode about this. That's right, we did. So check that out. It's an interesting episode. But yeah, it really came to light this year. It's where the independent counsel, Kenneth Starr, sends his report to Congress, and they offer up his impeachment. He, of course, does not actually get impeached, but they do put it up for the Senate. And basically, it really came down to lying under oath and obstruction of justice or perjury when he basically said he did not have sexual relationships with that woman, when in fact he did. So later on in the year, around August, he actually does admit of an improper physical relationship and apologize for having misled people about the relationship. Yeah, Bill Clinton, Slick Willie, as people like to call him. He also had some harassment charges from Paula Jones. Yeah, the guy liked to play around. Yeah, so if you want to know more about that, check out that episode. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on it in this one because I got a lot to go into. Here's a date worth remembering, January 25th of that year. And that's John Paul II visits Cuba. So why is that news? Well, I mean, Cuba was a communist country that basically kicked out and banned religions. But Pope going there was trying to help open up relations with Cuba and all that kind of stuff. And I think, for me, I like the fact that the Pope called out the U.S. for its ridiculous embargo on Cuba. I mean, seriously, we deal with communist countries all the time. Yet for some reason, generation after generation, we've got this ridiculous embargo on Cuba that is never going away. And clearly hasn't hurt the country that much. In fact, it's probably helped it out because due to that embargo, it's a great place to visit for vacationers who want to go and ride around in old cars. So yeah, it's a stupid embargo. I don't know why it's still on. I mean, I guess I know why, because a lot of former Cubans that live in Florida vote and I don't know, whatever. It's ridiculous politics, BS. And the U.S. needs to lift that embargo. Pope John Paul II agreed. Also, in February of that year, Mary Kay Letourneau violated her probation with the 14-year-old father of her baby. So we had an episode on Mary Kay Letourneau because I met her when I went to Starbucks. She came in for a coffee. And so I talk about my little story and we talk about that scenario and kind of what happens. So she had already gone to jail at this point, got out and continued to see the boy and got caught again and was sentenced to 7 years in jail at that point. The Space Shuttle Discovery launches with 77-year-old John Glenn on board. So he was an astronaut who became a congressman, who then became the oldest person to go into space at that point. I guess William Shatner probably beat him at that now, since he went up a few years ago. We also had the Good Friday Agreement go into effect. So I had a friend of mine on the show, Cathal Feeney, who is Irish from my time in Ireland. And we have a whole episode talking about the Good Friday Agreement. So we get into it. It's a very interesting episode, especially because, he was there. He didn't live in Northern Ireland, and he lived in the Republic of Ireland, but of course it's on the news and relevant. And yeah, so definitely check that one out. But it goes into agreement. It was signed by the British and Irish governments in April, and then in May it was voted on via the country, and 75% voted yes, and it ended the troubles in Northern Ireland. On the subject of crimes, I want to talk about a guy by the name of Matthew Shepard. So he was a gay man in Wyoming, and he was attacked, beaten, robbed, and left tied to a fence. They did find him still alive, but unfortunately, he died a few days later. So this is really, when we talk about hate crimes, this is what we're talking about. And it actually helped lead to the Hate Crimes Prevention Act in 2009. It led to a huge debate at that time about hate crimes. I remember this story, and it was quite brutal. Like, I mean, the fact that these two guys would basically beat him and, you know, leave him for dead just because of his sexual preference is ridiculous. I also think a lot of this helped lead to maybe some of the laws, not just around hate crimes, but around, you know, our eventual legalization of gay marriage and acknowledgement of, you know, sexual preference does not, people should be allowed to do whatever they want sexually as long as it's with another consenting adult. Right. So yeah, so it was pretty bad. They, you know, like I said, beat him, left him tied to the fence in freezing weather. And, unfortunately he did die. So yeah, those are my unhappy news things. Here's a stupid one. The Earth Liberation Front sets fire to a ski resort in Colorado, causing $12 million in damage. Now, why is this stupid? Okay, so you care about the planet and you want to protect the planet. So what do? You burn a bunch of wood, which releases toxins into the atmosphere, which then causes those companies to have to chop down a whole bunch more wood to rebuild the buildings that got burnt down. That's why this is stupid. How do you protect the environment by destroying the environment? It's ridiculous, and it doesn't help your cause at all, in the same way that these morons that are gluing themselves to priceless pieces of art is not helping their cause at all. All right, let's get off the news because it's making me irritated and talk about something fun, like music. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Dr. Dre of Aftermath Entertainment signed an unknown rapper by the name of Eminem. Not unknown anymore. The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, the debut album of Lauryn Hill, was released. It went on to win 5 Grammy Awards, including Album of the Year. Fantastic album. I love that album. Another album I love is Garbage's version 2.0. I had the CD and I rocked out to it all the time. I saw Garbage in concert. Huge Garbage fan, and still a huge fan, really. Actually, I believe they're still around. You don't hear too much about them anymore. It's a weird thing about musicians that they have like this huge peak and then just never really seems to last for some reason. But yeah, it debuted at number 13 on the Billboard 200, sold 88,000 copies in its first week, one of which was to Moi. And great stuff on that album, and I absolutely love it. Also in music from that year, and kind of on the alternative chart, was Goo Goo Dolls, their album Iris, or their song Iris, from their album Dizzy Up the Girl, which was their 6th album, was released in 1998. But I think that is really the one that kind of shot them to the top of the charts. That's kind of the one that got everybody knowing. Had the song Iris on it, which was huge. I was kind of okay on the Goo Goo Dolls. Oddly, I did see them in concert once, though they weren't really the band I wanted to see. It was one of those concerts where like multiple bands were playing, and I went to see other bands. But yeah, I saw them. It was an okay show. Not really into them anymore. I did not buy that album. The Titanic soundtrack. Talked about Titanic in 1997. It was riding high in 1998, and everybody was still listening to it because their heart will go on. In sports news, it was another Olympics year. That year, it was held in Japan in Nagano. Hope I'm saying that correctly. Couple highlights. The women's ice hockey team beat Canada for a gold medal. Suck it, Canada. Hockey country. Get beaten by Americans. And in hockey news, the men's hockey team got in trouble for destroying their rooms at the Olympic Village that year. I'm going to jump over to books real quick. The second Harry Potter book was released, Chamber of Secrets. Was huge, of course. No real need to mention that. I do want to mention Tom Clancy, though. I haven't actually talked about him here in the 90s, but he was huge. He wrote these like kind of thrillers, the Jack Ryan series, which got turned into movies. And then the John Clark ones got turned into a couple of movies. The first one of the John Clark series was Without Remorse in 1993. But then he released Rainbow Six in 1998, which also focused on that character. So it debuted at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. And it's just worth mentioning because you don't really hear about Tom Clancy anymore. He passed away in he passed away in 2013. Yeah, that's right. But he's got video games, Tom Clancy's video games, books, movies. So his estate must be worth bank from all of the stuff that he did. But yeah, he was big in the 90s with his books, and that was one of them. Let's talk about television for a minute. Dawson's Creek premiered January on the WB channel, little startup channel, created by a guy by the name of Kevin Williamson, who you probably don't know. However, you do know everyone who was in that. James Vanderbeek, Katie Holmes, and Joshua Jackson. So ladies, were you a James Vanderbeek girl or were you a Joshua Jackson girl? And boys, there was only one Katie Holmes, and that's all there needs to be, which really I think is probably the only reason why most guys watch that show. It wasn't on for super long, 98 to 2003, though there were quite a few episodes, it released 128 episodes throughout its run. So even though, because that was just back in the day when a series would release lots of episodes in a season, to whereas now as you get like 6 episodes, the season's over, and then 3 years later you get another season. Won a bunch of Teen Choice Awards. It was a popular show. A lot of people liked about it, and a lot of people talked about it. It was one of those water cooler shows that people talked about. I guess maybe if you were a teen or young adult, probably not too many adults talked about it. The theme song, I Don't Want to Wait, by Paula Cole, was huge. And it's kind of one of those things. Did the popularity of the song help the show? Or did the show's popularity help the song? Either way, it worked out. In some more ridiculous news, Oprah Winfrey was found not guilty of beef defamation. Yes, that's right. The Texas cattleman brought a defamation lawsuits against her because of a show that she did on beef. Basically, what happened was she did an episode on dangerous foods where she had a guest by the name of Howard Lehman, a former cattle rancher, and they discussed the health risks of eating beef, one of which could be mad cow's disease, obviously, if the cow has it. And the beef producers, the cattlemen, were enraged, and sued her because they figure she is so popular. If Oprah Winfrey says don't eat meat, people are not going to eat meat. Maybe, I guess. I mean, Oprah Winfrey tells you which books to read, and it impacts book sales. By the way, Oprah, I'm going to be coming out with a book here in the next year. If you would like to recommend that, I would gladly appreciate any shout out you have to offer. Yeah, so it really came down to a question about free speech and liability if you're a public figure. The court and jury said that's ridiculous and dismissed the lawsuit. And it's funny because you watch the interview with her right after, and she comes out and she's talking, and she's like surrounded by 12 lawyers. And it's like, yeah, I'd like to thank my team of all these super highly paid, successful lawyers because I got crap tons of money. But yeah, it's a ridiculous lawsuit. It's one of those scenarios where like people talk about, how easy it is to sue in the country and how ridiculous some of the lawsuits are. This is one of them due to the cattle beef guys. Didn't seem to hurt sales, to my understanding. People still eat a lot of meat. Also on TV, we said goodbye to Seinfeld. They aired their 2-part final episode, 76.3 million viewers. Companies paid $2 million for a 30-second commercial to be seen there. I watched it, and I fell into the category of people who were slightly disappointed by it. I didn't really feel the need to watch a 2-part series finale that was basically a clip show. That's my opinion. I know some people did like it, but I think overall people were pretty disappointed in it. We actually talk about this in our best and worst series finales podcast episode, where we debate this particular one as to whether or not it falls into the best or worst. Maybe it's not the worst. I said it was, but it certainly was not the best. How about on the subject of premieres? Sex and the City premiered on HBO. That was a huge show that went on for a long time and then turned into movies. Sarah Jessica Parker, Kim Cattrall, Kristen Davis, and Cynthia Nixon. I didn't watch it. One, because I didn't have HBO. And two, I didn't really feel like sitting around with a martini and a face mask and gossiping or whatever it is that girls do when they watch that show. They knew their audience, and their audience loved it. A good friend of mine, she loves Sex and the City. We would occasionally make bets on random things. And if I lost the bet, I would have to sit down with her and watch an episode of Sex and the City. So there you go. So that's my watching of Sex and the City. But yeah, it's super huge and went on to make some movies. Another show that they recently did kind of a short-lived revival of, Will and Grace, starring Aaron McCormick, Deborah Messing, and Megan Mullally and Sean Hayes. So this show was pretty impressive. I did like this show. It got a bit repetitive over time. I didn't watch the reboot, but it was a show praised for the fact that it featured gay lead characters, something that really didn't happen a whole lot at the time. And it had some good writing, had some good episodes, and yeah, it was fun. I probably didn't watch it throughout the entire run of it. I think it went on for like 246 episodes. It went on for a really long time. Yeah, it was a funny show. It was fun, and props for being a successful show featuring gay lead characters at that time. Let's jump over to movies. The big movie from 1998, Saving Private Ryan. Not Shaving Ryan's Privates for you porn watchers. So it was made by Steven Spielberg, starred Tom Hanks, and a whole bunch of other people, including a relatively unknown Matt Damon. Yeah, so Matt Damon was actually cast in this because he wasn't famous at the time. And Steven Spielberg wanted somebody who had that kind of like all-American look, but wasn't super famous. Of course, he went on to win an Oscar for writing Good Will Hunting and became super famous. But there you go. This movie has one of the most amazing opening sequence, that Normandy invasion sequence at the beginning. Cost $11 million to shoot, involved about 1,000 extras. And it was filmed in Ireland, actually, not actually on the Normandy beaches in northern France, which I've been to. I just went there this last May. It is an amazing place to go. And it really puts into perspective the scale to stand up on those cliffs and look all the way left as far as you can see and all the way right as far as you can see, and to realize that all of that was being bombarded and soldiers and just the mass chaos of the whole place. And then, of course, they still had the behind the line stuff. But anyway, getting off track there. It was really quite an amazing place to visit. This movie is an amazing film. It was kind of a love letter to Steven Spielberg's father, and it deserved all its accolades. There's that speech with Tom Hanks where he kind of does this little monologue where he finally like tells everybody that he's a teacher and stuff. And it was actually supposed to be a much longer monologue, which most actors are always like, yeah, give me more lines because I'm an actor and I want to impress you with my acting. And Tom Hanks was like, well, no, I don't think my character would actually say all that much. He's kind of a quiet guy. And so they shortened it. If you haven't seen this movie, get out and watch some films, man. Like, it's a fantastic movie. People who fought on Normandy Beach and saw this film actually said it was really well done. And yeah, the music by John Williams, the editing, the special effects, like, this is across the board just a brilliant film. Since we're on the subject of Tom Hanks, why don't we talk about You've Got Mail, starring Tom Hanks, Meg Ryan. It was made by Nora Ephron, and it was kind of that mid to late 90s Tom Hanks Meg Ryan, rom-com era. Personally, I'm more of a Sleepless in Seattle guy, probably because I'm from Seattle. But hey, it came out that year as well. The cult classic The Big Lebowski was released in 1998 by the Coen brothers, starring Jeff Bridges, who basically plays himself. It's funny, you like watch interviews with him and he's like, yeah, he's basically the dude, to the point to where he even used some of his own clothing in the film, including his jelly sandals. It didn't make a ton of money. It had a $15 million budget, grossed $19 million, and then went on to gross $48 million worldwide over the years. So it did eventually make a decent chunk of change, but it wasn't really a huge hit. It was a slow burner, and now it's a cult classic. I've seen it a few times. It has great one-liners, great performances, stand-up performance, of course, by John Turturro, who's not in the film all that much, truthfully, but he's so fantastic as that character that you have to absolutely remember and appreciate his performance. John Goodman, Steve Buscemi, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Julianne Moore. It's just a all-star cast. It's a great film. If you haven't seen it, that's another one you should check out. For the people that love the romance movies, Shakespeare in Love was released in 1998. It's not a film you hear a lot about anymore, but it was talked about a lot then. Yeah, I guess because it went on to win a few Oscars. Starred Gwyneth Paltrow, Joseph Fiennes, and was kind of a take on William Shakespeare's fling with Gwyneth Paltrow. I'd like to point out, of course, if he's like chasing after Gwyneth here in London, well, he's got a wife, so where's she at? However, a movie that we do still hear a lot about, The Truman Show, was released in 1998, basically just a precursor to our modern social media obsessed culture. In a movie that I really enjoyed, The Mask of Zorro, starring Antonio Banderas, Anthony Hopkins, and Catherine Zeta-Jones. Okay, Antonio Banderas and Catherine Zeta-Jones. Could you imagine a more perfect cast for that film? It's great. It's got the swashbuckling and it's fun. They made a sequel to it. Yeah, kind of not as exciting, but this one I thought was really fun and really enjoyed it. And I'd watch that again. I totally would watch that again. I think I have watched it a few times, but yeah, I mean, they the perfect cast. Also released in 1998, the first Marvel film starring a black actor. Yes, I'm sorry, all you Black Panther fans that are like, finally, Marvel released a movie starring a black actor as the lead character. No, they did that a long time before Black Panther. And don't get me wrong, I like Black Panther. I think it's a great film. But I like Blade. Blade rocks. Wesley Snipes rocks as Blade. The sequels kind of slowly went downhill, but this one I think was fantastic. Didn't have a huge budget, which I think is probably one of the reasons why. You got Stephen Dorff as the bad guy, Chris Christopherson as Whistler, his assistant / mentor. It's a good film, and it was the Marvel Cinematic Universe before Marvel Cinematic Universe was a thing, I guess. They keep trying to make a reboot of this, which for whatever reason just doesn't seem to be happening. They even parried that a little bit in the Deadpool versus Wolverine movie, where they had Wesley Snipes' Blade make an appearance. Kind of a nice little call out, especially because on the third one, Wesley Snipes and Ryan Reynolds, well, I guess technically Wesley Snipes can get along with anybody on that film from the sounds of it. But anyways, the first Blade movie was released. Great film. And let's wrap it up here by just some call outs from the Academy Awards from that year. Unsurprisingly, Titanic from the previous year did pretty well. So let's just skip all the awards that it got and just go straight into As Good as It Gets, which I didn't mention came out the previous year, but fun film. Nice little rom-com with Jack Nicholson and Helen Hunt. Robin Williams won his Best Supporting Actor for Good Will Hunting, and Kim Basinger in LA Confidential, another film you don't really hear all that much about anymore. And I mentioned Matt Damon. I'll mention him one more time. Him and his pal Ben Affleck won for Best Screenplay for Good Will Hunting and gave a fantastic acceptance speech. All right, let's wrap it up on that. Like I said, it was a big year. Didn't even get into everything just because it was that big of a year. Hopefully I got some of the highlights for you. And with that, I will see you in 1999.